top player of the day, the essential world champion, even though the title wasn't invented yet, was Howard Staunton. He organised the tournament. He managed to gather a prize fund of £500, which may not sound like a lot for the first ever international tournament, but it was actually loads. A huge amount of money back in those days. Damn inflation. However, enough about the tournament, because this game actually wasn't played in the tournament. It was played with amongst two people that were in the tournament, but it was a friendly game played in Simpson's cigar and cafe bar in the Strand. It's still open now these days. In fact, they have a bit of a legacy of chess. So if you're ever in London, you can go to Simpson's and play chess there. I'm pretty sure they still have chessboards. The final thing to mention is that Kieseritzky, the book describes him as where are we? A difficult and irritable personality. So it's interesting because apparently he was an inventor of a version of 3D chess, which he thoroughly failed to get anyone else to understand. So good stuff. He actually, I believe he lived in France for a time, and he used to play in a similar sort of cafe bar to Simpson's in Paris. And actually, after this game was played, he telegrammed all the moves back to that cafe where people were waiting expectantly to hear from him. So that should give you an idea of how astounding that the game is. So without further ado, let's dive in. So we have Adolf Anderssen playing the white pieces, Lionel Kieseritzky playing the black, and a nice guest appearance from Emanuel Lasker with the quote, which we'll get to in a minute. So let's dive in. E4 by Adolf Anderssen, E5 and F4. This is called the King's Gambit. I think it's still played today. It's not like in regular circulation, but one of the coaches on the UK Chess Challenge said this is one of his favourite openings. So obviously some pretty high level players are still playing it today. Kieseritzky accepts the Gambit. The idea is you just sort of propel your development by giving up a pawn, because like this knight can come out nicely, a bishop's coming out, this pawn can come here with an attack on the pawn that you just allowed to be taken. So you have a nice game. So bishop c4. This is an interesting move because it's called the Bishop's Gambit, and it allows Queen h4 check. You might think this looks like a really nasty move because you can't really block with the pawn, because then you'll just get your pawn taken and you can't even capture back because you'll get your rook taken. But the idea is that you invite Queen h4 check. You give up your right to castle by just simply moving your king. As I said, you don't want to block with the pawn. And later on, you're essentially preparing the move knight to f3, and that's gonna, and we talk about like tempo a lot on the stream, that's going to come with a tempo because the queen's going to be on this square, so it's going to come with an attack on the queen. So you're essentially giving up a move now by letting black check your king in order to gain a tempo back later. So you might not be surprised to hear with all of that preamble that the queen came to h4 and put the king in check. So king f1 and b5. This also has a name. It's called the Brian Counter Gambit. It's not considered a very good move at all nowadays. However, Kieseritzky spent a lot of time sort of analysing the lines that followed after this move. So he was somewhat familiar with it. So you might not be surprised that I've just told you it's a gambit and it's not a very good move. So the best move is unsurprisingly going to be to just accept the gambit and take the pawn. And now knight f6, finally a normal developing move after all that madness. Knight f3. So as I said, we prepared that move by allowing black to check us and giving up our right to castle. So we've got our knight out with tempo, which is always nice. Queen just runs away because you don't want to give up your queen. And d3. So sort of X-raying, eyeing up the queen, and solidifying the center, just making a nice pawn chain. The computer actually recommends d4, so clearly the computer's not really worried about giving up this pawn, probably because the king's still in the center of the board. But d3 definitely a pretty solid move as well. So the next move played was knight to h5, which is a bit of a funky move. Better alternatives would have been to just develop a piece, bring this bishop out, develop a knight, just usual opening stuff. But the idea behind knight h5 is that it adds more protection to this pawn, which is looking a bit dodgy with the bishop there, and it also comes with a bit of a threat. So I'll throw this one out to chat. Let's say I just play a3 here, thinking, or even just develop a knight, thinking you don't have anything. You've just got your knight on the edge of the board and your queen. Which move are you going to play? Well, Gina Rook has already got it. Gina Rook, the #1 top bit donator of the stream. She's already got it, yeah. Queen Eating Dragon also got it. Knight g3 check. So let's say I just play a3. Yeah, lots of people getting it now. Good stuff. Knight comes to g3 check. And the crucial idea behind this move is that you can't capture the knight because you allow the queen into your ranks, and also with check. So not something you want to allow. So knight h5. Obviously, there are ways to defend against this, and that's why it's not really a very good move, because not only have you failed to develop a piece, you move the same piece twice in the opening, you've also put your knight on the edge of the board, which is not where knights like to be. So knight h4. Obviously, if the same move were to be played, you just capture the knight, and now your rook defends the your own knight. So you're happy days. Obviously, it puts your own knight on the edge of the board, but it's not a terrible move. You're eyeing up this square for your knight, which again is going to come with an attack on the queen, and you might not be surprised to hear that this is what's going to come in the following moves. So yeah, I mean, you temporarily move your knight into the edge, but you're not really doing it for very long. Queen g5 with an attack on the knight, and as I said, you don't want to allow the knight to come here with tempo. So seems like a pretty principled move. And knight f5, as we talked about. Why would you move the knight back? Okay, you can move it back with an attack on the queen, but that's not the move that was played. But it's much nicer on that square. It's lovely square, middle of the board, exactly where you want your knights to be, except we don't want knights like this, we want knights like this. So c6 was played in this position, and it looks like a principled move in principle, but it's not really a great move. The idea is that, okay, in this position, this pawn is pinned. It's not generally good to have pinned pieces. So c6 unpins the pawn, and it comes with an attack on the bishop. So pretty. It's not a bad move, but there were better options. Some better options include chasing this knight away immediately. As we've said, it's on a very nice square. We don't want it to allow it to stay there. Or just simply developing a bishop to this diagonal, and we'll see why this diagonal is important later in the game. But anyway, c6 was the move that was played. And now I think, someone just said g6 would have been good. Yeah, so you've already spotted the mistake that was made. So g4, again, a nice move. Like, it attacks the knight. You've got two options here. You could just go for bishop for knight, or you could move the knight back. The knight was moved back in the game, and interestingly, it allows white quite a lot. This move, although it doesn't seem obvious, because moving the knight back looks like quite a principled move, because white still has this threat of capturing, but rather black still has this threat of capturing the bishop, and now you have two pieces attacking this pawn, and the white king is looking very precarious. He's not going to be able to escape easily because he can't castle. So you do have to be very careful. And given I've told you there's two threats, you might be surprised to hear that rook g1 was played, i.e. the threat which has been addressed is the pawn rather than the bishop. But white had something in mind here. If the bishop was captured, it's not necessarily a move that immediately wins material, but you might, the eagle-eyed of you might notice that the black queen is sort of entirely encased in pieces here, and it's going to be relatively easy to trap it and just make it redundant, at least for a few moves. So the bishop was accepted. for those of you who are interested in the like best engine move here, h5, just making like a way for your queen to get out of the horribleness, and obviously white can just retreat the bishop after that. But that was not what was played, and if that was played, this game certainly wouldn't be an Immortal. So the first piece has been sacrificed, first of many. So h4, this is the plan. So now the queen is very much, excuse me, entirely encased in pieces. The knight guards this square, the pawns guard these squares. Only square for the queen is to move back. The pawns can't be captured because they're defended by the knight and the rook. So queen goes to g6. Now we push h5, bringing the queen back. And the reason we want the queen on that square is because it's very nice that the pawn is pinned to the queen. And now queen f3, just sort of solidifying everything and crucially adding 2 attackers to this pawn. So again, I throw out the gauntlet to the chat. I've sort of given away one of the answers there, but there's still another one. So there are 2 good moves. Well, there's 2 threats in this position. Let's say again we just play some boring slow move like b4. What do you want to do in this position? So let's see if we get any suggestions. So after black plays something rubbish, if he's just not paying attention, how are you gonna push your advantage? Yep. So we've already got some. There are 2 interesting moves here though to consider. Yeah, good. So Queen Eating Dragon's really on it today. Well done to everyone who got bishop takes f4. Yep, and Chills has also got e5. So yeah, bishop takes f4. The immediate obvious move, trapping the queen. You know, seems like a good move. You can trap the queen. It's always a good idea. And this e5 is also pretty spicy because it comes with an attack on the knight and it reveals a lovely queen attack onto the rook. And remember earlier on in the game when we mentioned, like, you know, maybe it would have been better to play g6, maybe it would have been better to play bishop to b7. Well, if either of those things have been played, you know, subsequent to a similar position to this arising, then none of these threats would be there. You know, obviously this knight wouldn't be here. Okay, if this was contrived in the same way, pushing the pawn would be a terrible move because the bishop would be able to take the queen. So you can really see why lack of development can be punishing in this game. And in fact, I speak about lack of development. The next move was knight to g8. So we talk about, you know, oh, let's play, you know, knight to c3 developing a piece. Well, this is playing knight to g8 undeveloping a piece. Okay, it does deal with both the threats seemingly, because now if the pawn is pushed, we can simply just block the queen's attack with the knight, because there's no threat of taking this knight anymore. And now the queen has some escape squares. But okay, the queen has some escape squares, but the threat of bishop takes an f4 is still there. So bishop takes f4 was played. You know, developing a piece, check. Winning a pawn, check. Comes with tempo on the enemy queen, check. You know, ticks all the boxes, good stuff. Everything you want out of a move. If you could do that with every move, you'd win the game very quickly. So queen f6, just getting out of danger. It's pretty much the only square you want your queen. I admit it would have been very funny if queen to d8 would be played in this position, because then all your pieces have managed to make it back to the back rank. Yeah, it is a bit of a spoil sport. So yeah, queen to f6. Knight to c3. So Anderssen playing a nice principled game, developing all his pieces. Kizaretsky not playing a very principled game, but you know, this game could still go either way. Like, black is up material, so if you're up material, there's always a chance. If you can just swap pieces off, you may well be fine. Bishop c5 again. In principle, looks like a pretty nice move. Develop a piece, attack a rook. That's basically what we did with this bishop takes pawn. It wasn't the best move in the position, but you know, it's a decent move, and these like horrible computer lines are really hard to spot, especially back in the 19th century. So interestingly, Reti, the move that was played was knight d5 here, attacking the queen. Reti recommends d4, and then after the bishop goes away, then knight d5, and crucially that stops the queen's attack on the b2 pawn. And why do I mention the b2 pawn? Because after knight d5 was played, the queen captured the b2 pawn. So this is an interesting position in the game. Bishop d6 was played here, and this is essentially a pretty big blunder. However, it's one of those things where it's two humans playing. You're incredibly, being incredibly aggressive. You're on the attack. There are very limited defensive resources for Kieseritzky to employ here, and it involves seeing many moves down into the position. So for those of you who are interested in the boring engine line from this position, I'll show that first. So queen takes a1 check, king moves out the way, queen goes to b2, threatening to capture this pawn. Bishop takes, queen c2 check, king moves, take the bishop back, queen f4, and if you look at this, like, okay, white's down material, but he's still got a nice attack, and without going through the rest of the line, we'll eventually end up in a point where white is perpetually checking the black king. So okay, we could have held this to a draw if we were black. However, it's we've already gone like 8 or 9 moves down the line. You would have had to see another like 8 or 9 moves down the line to get to this drawn position. So unsurprisingly, Kieseritzky did not see 20 moves ahead down the disgusting engine line. So there are a few other things to note in this position. Let's say black played bishop captures on d6. Can anyone spot a forced checkmate in 4 moves from this position? That's the first question. So I'll tell you, it is there. So there is a forced checkmate in 4 moves. There are, 4 moves is tricky, but just think about forcing moves, checks, captures, threats. Before we continue the game, it's just the reason I wanted to show this, because it's important to note that this black bishop here is very well placed, and you don't want to give it up for a knight. So knight takes d6 first has been suggested, which is the correct move. So I'll tell you the next move. King goes to d8. What are we going to play now? 3 moves. Forced checkmate in 3 moves. So queen takes on d7. That, I'm not sure about that move, because our queen can't. Maybe you mean f7. Yep, so we've had the correct continuation from Rohit and Ben Philo, which is knight takes f7. It's always good to just do checks if you can, because it's forcing. Yeah, sorry, I don't know why you've been timed out there. I think Queen Eating Dragon has got it exactly right. So doing very well today. King goes to e8, only move. Now the knight comes back, and now crucially you've removed this pawn, this annoying pawn out of the way, and now you all see the checkmate, because now the queen, the pawn's gone out of the way. The queen can just come in and deliver checkmate. So in this position, we cannot play bishop takes on d6, because we're just going to completely throw the game away. And in fact, Gary Kasparov mentioned, we would have lost one of the crown jewels of chess if the game had just finished in such a boring fashion. So bishop takes on g1 was played. So taking the rook, you saw in the engine line that taking the rook with the queen first was better, and well, essentially what I was just showing with the forced checkmate is why, because this bishop is a very good defensive piece. It's basically your only developed piece except the queen, and it just can't afford to give itself up for the rook. So the next move played was e5. Again, another glorious move, just putting more pieces into the attack, saying, you can take my rook, I don't care. And crucially, let's say, for example, I play a slow move here, like a6. Can anyone in the chat spot a forced checkmate in 2 moves this time? So e5 does come with a threat of a checkmate in 2 moves. So who can see checkmate in 2 moves here? I think someone said knight takes g7 check. Yeah, we've got a couple of... yeah, good. Everyone's getting it. So knight takes g7, only move is king d8, and now bishop c7 by Chills. Good stuff. So we've already got a threat of checkmate, and having a threat of checkmate is very nice. Obviously, You might not be surprised to find out that Kieseritzky just took the rook. He said, well, I can take a rook with check, and then I can deal with my problems after that. So king e2, and now what's really fun to note in this position is that if you tot up the material, black is up 2 rooks and a bishop. So again, if he can hold this, 2 rooks and a bishop, that's a lot of points to be up. You should easily be able to win. For those of you, so there's a story behind this position. Kieseritzky claimed that he resigned in this position. Most other sources claim that he played knight to a6, and I'll throw it out in a moment. In this position, there is a forced checkmate in 3 moves, and supposedly Anderssen announced this forced checkmate in 3 moves, said these are the moves, and then the game was adjourned. What a legend, exactly. So yeah, well, let's throw this out to the chat before I show the disgusting engine line. So yeah, who can see checkmate in 3 moves from here? I guess if you've seen it before, don't spoil it. Queen eating dragon. And what's amazing about this forced checkmate is that, here's a hint, we're only going to end up with these 3 pieces and the pawns left, so it's going to involve a queen sacrifice. So good, knight takes on g7 is the first correct move. King goes to d8. Now what is the move? This is a really fun move. So it's not bishop e7, bishop c7 because the knight can capture, and it's not bishop here because this knight can capture. So yeah, queen f6. Everyone's getting it now. Queen f6 is seemingly a silly move because you're just giving up your queen, but if you can get checkmate, then it's good stuff. So queen takes knight takes the queen, and now bishop e7 checkmate. And this is the glorious final position of the game where black is up 2 rooks, a queen, and a bishop, and he's still lost. For those of you interested in how to hold this game in this position, if you're playing black, the disgusting engine line, you're still going to be losing, but maybe Kieseritzky could have taken it to some kind of endgame. So bishop a6 makes a bit more room for the king. The knight comes to c7 with check, which seems like a pretty natural move to win back some material. King goes to d8, knight takes the bishop. You can't recapture with your knight because the queen will just come and gobble up your rook. So queen to c3, just trying to get more defense around the king. Bishop c7 check. And again, you're getting checkmated if you don't give up your queen here, so the queen's got to go. Knight takes, knight c6, and then, knight takes the rook. And then we go into this endgame where, okay, 2 knights each and a queen for a rook and a bishop. So best case scenario, Kieseritzky could have held it to this endgame. But, if you look at the material and the position, Anderssen would have easily been able to win. So let's go back to the lovely checkmate position. It's just amazing. Everyone's calling it some lovely stuff in the chat. Amazing stuff by Anderssen. It's somewhat reminiscent of Morphy's opera game, which I covered I think last week, where like Morphy managed to checkmate the 2 opponents with essentially a rook and a bishop. Just amazing stuff.